was back in 1996 or 97, I forget the dates exactly. Um, Dr. Charles Terry, a member of Dillman Karate International, one of the masters, he had convinced some of his colleagues that maybe it would be a good idea if they did a little bit of a kind of scientific look at pressure point knockouts just to make sure we weren't hurting each other. So we set up, they set up this research study, and Sensei Dillman asked a whole bunch of people to come, and we all came. And I was there. My primary job was, because I'm the guy who does the writing, I was basically taking photographs and documenting so that I could write articles about it, which I did, and included it in some detail in one of our books, the book called Humane Pressure Point Self-Defense. There's a section in the back, an appendix, where I talk about this experience. And it was great. We had a great time. Learned a lot, and just was fun. And basically the most important thing we learned is that there was nothing that the doctors could find that indicated we were actually hurting each other. So good on us. But one of the things I noticed, and this for me was a really interesting learning experience, that as people were going to do their knockouts, they were sometimes having trouble. And the reason they were having trouble is because, you know, it took 20 minutes to wire somebody up. And then the doctors were like, no, be careful not to knock off any wires. And so everyone was kind of freaking out. You call it performance anxiety if you want. They were like, ah. And so they were having trouble with the knockouts. And what started happening is that when people would have trouble with the knockouts, Sensei Dillman would say, Ed Lake, the late Ed Lake, friend of mine, great practitioner. I'd known Ed from the beginning of my time with Sensei Dillman. He was already one of Sensei's people, and I mean, Ed had been in my house. It was featured in the books that we wrote because he was there for the photo shoots, which we would do in a studio in my basement. And so Sensei Dillman goes, Ed, you do it. And so Ed would step in and boom, knock the guy out. And he did this over and over again. And so at one point I overheard a conversation between Sensei Dillman and a student of his, a guy named Ron Richards. Ron also has died now. Ron was he was one of the early guys doing pressure points, you know, long before me, because he'd been one of Sensei's students for a long time. But Ron was having trouble. He was trying to do the knockouts and he wasn't getting it because, you know, there were wires, and Sensei said, why can't you do that? And Ron looked at him and said, well, you know, they don't want us to knock the wires off, and and Sensei Dillman looked at him and said, but why, then how come Ed can do it? And what Ron said was really important. Ron looked at Sensei Dillman and he said, Ed doesn't give a crap. Okay, he didn't say crap, but you understand. But I realized something in that moment. I mean, it was like a light bulb went off. And I watched Ed after that, and I realized, yeah, see, Ed didn't worry about all that other stuff. He just said, my job is to knock you out. I'm knocking you out. He didn't worry about knocking off a wire. He didn't worry about, you know, creating artifact. He worried about knocking somebody out. He's focused on that one purpose. This is a hard but important lesson. If you want to be effective in a martial art, especially pressure points, but any martial art, you have to be willing to not care about certain things, like, or at least maybe not care is a little too strong, but you have to be willing to accept certain kinds of outcomes, like, hey, if I knock them out, I might knock the wires off and mess up the results in that 20 minutes of preparation. Or more importantly, if I knock somebody out, I might actually hurt them. I call this dancing with the dark side, because you have to come to grips with the fact that if you practice a martial arts, you may hurt your opponent. Opponent? No, your training partner. That person might actually be your friend. But if you're going to do the technique on them, you have to at least accept the possibility. I'm not saying you're reckless or careless, but you have to accept the possibility of harm. And accept the fact that ultimately as martial artists, we're practicing an art which is designed to do harm to another human being. And we have to come to grips with that, and we have to accept that, and we have to deal with that, and we have to be honest and upfront about that. And that's a difficult thing to learn to do. But when you learn to do it, then you can progress. Dancing with the dark side. A lesson I learned from my friend Ed Lake, may he rest in peace. These are some reflections from the MasterClass, and I'm Chris Thomas. Thanks for watching. Now go train.